Good morning. I am Dr. Precious Porras. I currently serve the institution as the Assistant Vice Provost for Diversity and Equity, as well as the Director of the Office of Multicultural Affairs. Thank you for the invitation to participate today, and thank you even more for the service that you do and the service that you'll do throughout the school year. Today I present to you my views on service, and in particular serving from the margins. And I offer this perspective because I think that it's crucial that we understand what it means as we engage in service and the folks that we're doing the work for. So I'll start with an introduction of myself. As I said, I am Precious Porras. My pronouns are she, her, hers. I'm a brand new mom to Victoria, who's 3 months old. I'm a first generation college student. I love dogs. I love reading. I just became addicted to coffee. I love to cruise. Pre-COVID, I cruised quite often. I am a Jayhawk. I got my doctorate degree here at the University of Kansas. Probably like many of you, I also love Netflix and a good binge session. I'm a confessed bibliophile, love to read, and so much so that it's in here twice. And a lot of the research that I do is based in critical race theory. And I consider myself an emerging scholar, as this is a field that I think is crucial to understanding the work that we do and understanding the work that I do in higher education. And I do all of this because I think it's very important to pay it forward. So as a first generation college student, I didn't always know what I wanted to do or how to do it. And I had a lot of folks who put me in a position to be able to get to where I'm at today. And so a lot of the things that I do to pay it forward to help the next generation coming behind me. And so before I move on and talk about service, I also want to talk about some important people that you should know. So I do serve as the Assistant Vice Provost for Diversity and Equity, overseeing our student-facing units. If you're not familiar with D&E, we are housed in Strong Hall, and our Vice Provost is Dr. Jennifer Ng, who's also a faculty member in the School of Education. And D&E houses the student-facing units, as well as we are a hub for doing work for faculty and staff to ensure that we have a comprehensive view on how to better serve students on campus, to better serve all Jayhawks, but to create a more equitable campus. And so also I've included here Bulong Ramiz. Bulong is the director of the Emily Taylor Center for Women and Gender Equity. And Chris Oliveira. Chris is brand new to KU. He's in his second week, and he's the new director for the Sexuality and Gender Diversity Center. And so we have a lot of other team members that I didn't picture here, but we all work really hard specifically to ensure that KU is a place where anybody can succeed. In particular, though, we serve those with marginalized identities to ensure that they can be the most successful as possible. So I start this conversation with you all today to talk about serving from the margins, and I utilize the social change model of leadership as a framework for thinking about service and serving. And so social change looks at how an individual sense of responsibility to others and that realization that you can make things better for a pocket of society, that makes things better for society as a whole. And that's really what I'm talking about when I talk about serving the margins. If we serve those on the margins of the margins, serving those pockets will create more inclusive pockets for everybody. So when you serve those on the margins, everything else falls into place and we create social change that makes a better community for everyone. This model of leadership explicitly promotes the values of equity and social justice. It's rooted in action, and it's about trying to improve the communities that you're a part of, and it facilitates positive social change at the institution or in that community. And so really it says, you can make a difference. You as an individual can make a difference, and it's grounded in the belief that everybody can contribute to making the world a better place for the current generation and for future generations. But I would add an important component here is to avoid pitfalls. So you aren't fixing a problem, but rather you're working towards being in community and focus your work on focusing on working together towards solutions to problems that we all have in common. And so it's not just about, if there's an analogy about saving puppies in a river. So I love dogs, right? And say you're at the river and you see a dog floating down the river and you're like, hey, like, what's going on? Let me jump in, save this dog. And then you see another dog and another dog and another dog. And so service is saving the puppies, right? But the social change model on Serving from the Centers asks, why are there so many puppies in the river? What's going on? Let's look at what's happening up the river while the puppies are in the river, and what solutions can we create to solve this problem. And so I'm going to present to you some of my favorite quotes about service in response to this, and hopefully they'll inspire you to think about what you're doing and what you're doing in community with others. And I start with Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., who says, life's most persistent and urgent question is, what are you doing for others? And so I want to say that I am doing things. I'm very committed to service. I'm a member of Zeta Phi Beta Sorority Incorporated. It's a Divine Nine organization. And Zeta is an action-oriented organization with a focus on community service. And in particular, my chapter does service once a month. And that's a very important reason as to why I joined and why I continue to be a member in my specific chapter, is that we do service. And so you can see one of those pictures we're putting together meal bags for Harvesters Community Center. Another one we're serving at Ronald McDonald House. And then in the center picture, actually not doing Zeta work, but it was working alongside, you may recognize Marcia Carrasco in this picture. She and I created a social justice training program for community leaders in Topeka, and this was our first cohort to go through that. And that was that was a service project that we did because we believe that community leaders, in particular these were city council folks, should be educated about social justice, and it should be a framework from which they operate. And you also see, some of you may recognize Stephanie Mott at the front of that picture. She was a phenomenal leader and did a lot of service in her work. Stephanie has since passed, but she did a lot of work and activism to support the trans community, not just in Topeka, but in the entire state of Kansas. And so service is incredibly important to me in my own life. And that Dr. King quote is one that I live by, because I'm constantly asking myself, I'm in a place of privilege. How can I use that privilege? And how can I create community working with others to do better? Now, the social change model has some components to it, and I don't want to spend a lot of time on it, but they have the 7 C's of social change, and they're grouped into these 3 components. So there's the individual C's, the group C's, and the community C's. And in the individual one, there's consciousness of self. So really, are you aware of what your own beliefs and attitudes are? Congruence, are your behaviors in line with those beliefs? And are those behaviors in line with those beliefs? And commitment, are you committed to doing those things? And then in the group piece, there's collaboration. So are you working with others towards some sort of common effort? And then common purpose. So when you're working with others, what are your shared values? And then also in the group piece is controversy with civility. And it recognizes that 2 fundamental realities of any creative group effort, that there are going to be differences, that's just inevitable, and that those differences must be aired openly, but with civility. And so a lot of times, folks are so passionate about the work that they're doing, controversy will happen, but how can we be civil in resolving some of that controversy? And then lastly is the community goal or value, which is specifically citizenship. And it's where you as an individual within your group and you recognize the responsibility that you have to the community that you serve. And so I think that those are important components. And you can read more about this, and there's a great book that you can check out on the social change model of leadership. But I offer those really for you to think about, what are your individual values? Are you committed to them? How do they fit within a group value? And if there's some dissonance between your values and that group value, how do you resolve those issues? And then lastly, what are you doing with that for yourself and that group that's creating to the overall value of the community? And so Brian Solis, who is a digital um, uh, analysis, offers this quote: "Community is much more than belonging to something. It's about doing something together that makes that belonging matter." And I felt this so incredibly powerfully because I think that as Jayhawks, there are a lot of us that sometimes don't feel like we belong. And that may be a common experience you have with a Jayhawk or in other communities. And so I think that it's so important that what you're doing here today and what you do with CCO and your service in this community is about doing something to make sure that those folks who don't feel like they do belong, and that that belonging matters. Kathy Jitnall-Kinchner is an environmental activist. I'd strongly recommend that you go to YouTube, put in her name, and watch her video about work that she's doing. She's a Pacific Islander whose current home will be actually flooded. She lives on an island in the Pacific, and her island will actually be washed away because of environmental issues within the next 5 years. And so she's an environmental activist. And I saw her speak, and she's phenomenal. So definitely go put her name into YouTube and watch that video, or pick up her book, which is also great. And Kathy says, "It's time that the next generation, our generation, picks up the torch from our elders and continues the fight for justice." And she's very specifically talking about climate justice here, but I think that it's crucial that we pick up the torch and think through what are the next steps for our generation. We're facing unprecedented times with COVID and currently, and that's going to have a lot of impact on what it looks like to be a college student this year and for the next 5 years. And so what are you doing right now to have impact in the Jayhawk community or even in the Lawrence community as we continue this fight to ensure that we have an environment that is suitable for everyone? What are you doing to carry forward that torch? Dorothy Height was a civil rights activist, did a lot of phenomenal work alongside Dr. King. And sometimes women's voices are not seen or heard as part of the history of the civil rights movement. She was right there doing just as much work. And if you Google her, you'll actually see pictures of her meeting with President Eisenhower and Johnson, or President Johnson, talking about civil rights. And so she's a phenomenal woman, someone you should also know. And Dorothy says, "Without community service, we would not have a strong quality of life. It's important to the person who serves as well as the recipient. It's the way in which we ourselves grow and develop." And so the things that you are doing are incredibly important to the people that you serve and the community that you serve. But service is also about you and your own growth. And I encourage you to figure out what that looks like. So when you're serving, be present, be mindful, think about how it's impacting you, think about why you're doing it, how it aligns with your values, and how you're contributing to the greater society. Former President Barack Obama spent a lot of time speaking about service. And I shared this quote today because in particular with COVID, I feel challenged as to what I can do and how I can help. And so he says, "The best way to not feel hopeless is to get up and do something. Don't wait for good things to happen to you. If you go out and make some good things happen, you will fill the world with hope. You will fill yourself with hope." And so I'd encourage you to get and stay involved with CCO or whatever service looks like for you. In particular, if you're feeling challenged about how can I contribute, what does that look like? Just remember to get up and do something, do anything. And by moving forward and going out and creating good in the world, you can feel better. Congressman John Lewis, who just passed, phenomenal human, and I think that we can learn a lot from from John Lewis. He was arrested multiple times as a young student. He led the crossing over the bridge. He was just 19. He was a young person. He was a young student at the time that he was doing that, and in his entire life served clear through his passing when he was still an active congressman. And John Lewis says, if not us, then who? And if not now, then when? And I think this is just crucial because sometimes we think now's not the right time or I'm not the right person. And I think if you have something to give, then do it and don't wait to do it. This is Dolores Huerta, and she is a civil rights activist and labor leader, most famously known perhaps to some of you for her quote, "Si se puede," which a lot of folks attribute to Cesar Chavez, but it was actually Dolores who coined that phrase in terms of working with immigrants and the labor unions in California to create more equitable unions. And so I was lucky enough to meet her and hear her speak in person. And Dolores says, when you choose to give your time and your resources to participate in community work, that's what makes a leader. And so it's important to know that really what makes you a leader is not a title, but what you do and how you show up. And doing the work is incredibly important. And connected to John Lewis's quote is, you don't need to wait for someone to say, yes, you are the leader, you can do this. You just jump in and do what you can. Harvey Milk was a queer activist and the first openly gay person elected to any sort of political position in the nation when he became mayor of San Francisco in the 70s. He ultimately was assassinated, but Harvey Milk did a lot of great work, and he offers to sit on the front steps, whether it's a veranda in a small town or a concrete stoop in a big city, and to talk to our neighborhoods is infinitely more important than to huddle on the living room lounger and watch a make-believe world in not quite living color. And again, he's just saying, get up, do something, go out and talk to folks. And this resonates with that value of community and collaboration. What are you doing? Who are you hearing from? Who are you working alongside? You shouldn't just be doing the work because someone told you to do the work, but go out, hear from the people that you're working for and the people that you're working with, and understand why you're doing the work that you're doing. Maya Angelou, one of my favorite people in the world, and has been an incredibly influential person. Her readings have been incredibly influential for me in my life. She offers, I've learned that you should go through life that you shouldn't go through life with a catcher's mitt on. You need to be able to throw something back. And that resonates with me because it's about paying it forward. So how you got here, you didn't do it on your own. You received a lot of help, a lot of guidance. So at some point, what are you ready to throw back? What are you ready to give back? And you showing up today tells me that you are ready to give back and create change within your communities. Alice Walker, who's an author, she says, activism is the rent I pay for living on this planet. And I think sometimes folks don't think about activism or social justice as being service, but they absolutely are. These are folks, activists are folks who are engaged in doing work to create community and to create better communities. And that is service. And that's so incredibly important. And it resonates with me because I would not be here if not for folks who paved the way for me. So I do this work of social justice. I do this work of diversity education, specifically in higher education, to create better community. And so I'm an educator, but I'm also an activist, and I do it because that is the rent I pay for living on this planet. I want to create better community regardless of where I am. Another quote from Dr. King, everybody can be great because anybody can serve. You don't have to have a college degree to serve. You don't have to make your subject and your verb agree to serve. You don't have to know the second theory of thermodynamics and physics to serve. You only need a heart full of grace and a soul generated by love. And so I offer this because I think it's incredibly important to realize no matter how you're doing it, move forward with grace and love and carry those things through in the community that you're doing it. But also, again, connecting back to some of the quotes before, you can do it at any point and you can do it without any title. All you need is you. And so I end with this quote from Arthur Ashe, because if you don't know what to do or how to serve or where to start where you are, use what you have, and do what you can. thank you so much. I hope that you have a phenomenal day. I hope that you have an amazing school year, whatever that looks like for us. Please feel free to reach out to me. My contact information is here. You can follow me on Twitter, but also there's the Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram accounts for the OMA. We'd love to be engaged with you. We want to be social, so come and check us out on our social platforms. Please feel free to email me, call me. I'm not physically in the office due to COVID guidelines, but I'm always available via, as I said, email or phone, or even on Twitter. It's mostly dogs, but check out my Twitter. Again, thank you for the work that you do, and I hope that I'll see you on campus sometime in the spring.